we can get started. So those of you that are just joining, we're just adding into the chat some of the reasons why people are interested in plant-based eating. But I want to go ahead and introduce Ann Lapinski to everyone. So first, my name's Jennifer Clayton. I'm the Attorney Wellbeing Program Manager with the New York State Bar Association. And Ann Lapinski is one of our Wellbeing Committee members who has been incredibly dedicated to just the overall topic of well-being. With NYSBA, we focus on the 8 pillars of well-being. So that includes so many different facets of that contribute to well-being. And for the month of March, we were highlighting physical wellness. So Anne has done previously a Let Your Yoga Dance program for us as a certified yoga instructor, and is coming to us today as a certified nutritionist to speak to us on plant-based eating. So Anne, I will let you take it away. I will say, if you want to put questions in the Q&A, I'll monitor that. If they're relevant, I'll interrupt so Anne can answer them live, or we'll table some for the end. So that's what the Q&A portion is for, and Anne will use the chat feature for these interactive comments like we've done here. So yeah,
Great.
Anne, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm really happy that people are here this afternoon. It's pretty exciting. It looks like so far from the chat, the majority of people are saying health is the reason that they're choosing to go plant-based. And that's a great reason to go plant-based, because plant-based eating really does have a positive impact on your health. The good news is it's also much better for the planet. There was a New York Times article about this in the fall, and it asked people about what impact individual actions on the part of people would have would have a high, low, or medium impact on the environment. And eating a plant-based diet was listed as one way you can have a high impact on the environment. So I think that's really encouraging in our world that we're living in. But it also, eating plant-based also means that you're not killing animals, and generally people who eat a major vegan diet also generally are able to manage their weight better. So, and I just want to mention that my own diet is not strictly plant-based, but it's heavily plant-based is the way I would call it. So next slide, please. So the question for you is, if you're going plant-based, what does that mean in the changes that you're making? And you can move along there, Jen, to the next slide. So, are you starting with one plant-based meal a week? Some folks have done that. Reducing the amount of meat, dairy, cheese, eggs that you eat at every meal, going fully vegan, eating plant-based for some of your day and not necessarily all of your day. So I just want you to know that this program has no expectations that people are going to eat a strictly vegan diet. You certainly are welcome to do that if you'd like, but I'm just going to offer a lot of suggestions for dietary changes that you make where you can reduce your consumption of non-vegan things to eat. So go ahead, Jen. I love this piece of advice from Michael Pollan. He's written several books on food and eating. And it's something I always keep in the back of my mind. Eat food, not too much, and mostly plants. Go ahead. I'm just mentioning a few of the health reasons to go vegan. It reduces your heart disease risk, increases brain health, cuts cancer risk, cuts risk of diabetes. It keeps antibiotics working in the population. There's just the research just bears this out over and over again. When I was in graduate school, years ago, we just didn't have a lot of information about it. But now, over time, the evidence has really shown that vegan eating is really healthy for you. And I can tell you myself, I have a family history of high cholesterol levels. My cholesterol level is somewhat elevated, but I just did a particular test called a calcium score, which shows um, plaque buildup in your arteries. And my calcium score was like super low. So my diet has really helped me in terms of my future. And Jen, I see there's a question in the Q&A. I don't know if that's anything you need to bring up right now.
The question is just, could or is reducing excess carbs from a plant-based approach, how does that differ from what someone who's keto or a carnivore diet might say is, because I think there's uh, other methods that claim to also reduce carbs. So how do they differ, the approaches?
Well, um, I will tell you that I'm not like a super big fan of a keto diet, because I think keto diets really miss nutrients, the kind of nutrients you need in your everyday diet. And trying to eat a keto diet as a vegan is extremely difficult to do because you need to get protein sources, and beans are a big source of protein, but also a source of complex, healthy carbs. You can get protein from nuts and seeds, but you'd have to eat an awful lot of nuts and seeds. So that would be the sort of the keto version of the plant-based diet. I know that some people use a keto diet for weight loss and it works for them, but I know other people who use a keto diet for weight loss and then go back and gain the weight back. Side to side research on a keto diet for weight loss versus other healthy eating plans, one does not come out better than the other. They're pretty much the same. So, and we're going to be talking a lot more about what kinds of food to eat. So let's move on. But good question. Good question. Yeah, next slide, Jen. Okay. I just mentioned this. This is a movie and a book and a website called Forks Over Knives. And it's available on Netflix if you have access to that and you want to motivate yourself to eat a vegan diet. The movie looks at a researcher at Cornell and a cardiologist who look at issues of health. In one case, the cardiologist of patients, in the other case of the researcher looking at populations of people who eat a heavily vegan diet. And it could be, I know somebody who's cardiologist, whenever he goes for a visit, reminds him about forks over knives, because you don't need a knife to cut up beans and grains that you eat on a vegan diet. Go ahead. So one of the things that people do to switch out of dairy is to consume plant-based milks. There's a whole selection you see here on the screen. I will just talk a little bit about them in terms of which ones you might want to choose and why. Soy milk, from a protein standpoint, is a good substitute for dairy milk because it has about the same amount of protein as a cup of dairy milk. Almond milk, cashew milk, any of these nut-based milks not much protein. They are fortified. All of these are pretty much fortified with calcium and vitamin D, some other things we need. Um, these milks are much lower in carbs because they're based upon nuts. They're also much lower in calories. So if you're looking for something you just want to drink that doesn't have a lot of calories, a cup of unsweetened almond milk contains about 30 calories. But that's the unsweetened issue is really important because most of these milks offer different varieties. And once you add the sugar, you're reducing the health benefit of what you're consuming. So rice milk, it's kind of a thin, watery milk, and nutrient-wise, you're not getting much from it, but some people like it. Oat milk, I know a lot of people really like in their coffee if they're substituting a non-dairy milk for something in coffee. Folks are big fans of oat milk. A lot of the coffee places have that available these days. Flax and hemp, those are also a seed milk, so more similar in the almond cashew. Pea protein is the only other milk that has a good amount of protein in it. So if you're looking for something that contains protein, and I'll be talking a little bit more about protein as we move along. Coconut doesn't have a lot of the coconut fat in it, which is good because coconut fat is saturated fat. And some people really like the flavor. But again, if you're thinking about the switch, really keep your eyes on the sugar because like soy milk comes in unsweetened, it comes in plain, and it comes in vanilla. The plain is sweetened. It's only the unsweetened. And that's true for almond milk and some of the other milks too. So, okay, we can move on. What about plant-based meats? I can't say that I'm a big fan. I think from an environmental standpoint, all the processing that's done is not great. And my biggest concern is the use of coconut oil in these meats because coconut oil is a saturated fat, so it is not so healthy. And if you're looking for a healthier alternative, now, is it probably better to eat an Impossible Burger than to eat a regular hamburger? Probably yes. But at the same time, I just, bean burgers are much higher on my chart if there's a choice to eat something like that instead. And of course, you don't always have choices. So I also added here a new bacon. It's made in the Capital District of New York. It doesn't have a really wide distribution yet, but it is based on mushroom mycelium. So it's called My Bacon. And there are stores in the, Saratoga, Albany. There's some in Western Massachusetts, and I think in Connecticut, where this bacon is being distributed. In this case, the environmental impact is much lower because this is based on a plant that grows mushrooms and then converts it into a quote unquote bacon. I did taste this at a vegan fest. And I thought it tasted pretty good. It's, I think, 30 calories for a slice. So from a calorie standpoint, you're not getting all the fat and the nitrates that you are getting in regular bacon. So from a health standpoint, it's certainly much healthier. Again, the fat is coconut oil. And just to explain, coconut oil works because it is a solid at room temperature. So it provides stability in these items that you can't get from any other vegetable oil. Okay, move on to the next slide. So I just put a sample day of eating. Um, I think I don't think plant-based eating has to be really complicated. Um, and hopefully you you find things that are easier to bring to work if you're in an office. Usually people aren't there every day of the week now, which is great because it gives you alternatives. But these are all items that I have eaten in the course of a day, not necessarily all in one day, but I make my oatmeal with soy milk in the morning. I put some nuts and fruit on it. Edamame beans are a super great, easy vegan snack food. They come shelled and unshelled. If you have them shelled, you can just heat them up in the microwave real quickly. Um, um, Peanut butter. There was just a story this week about how regular sandwiches are really bad for us because they usually have a processed meat and cheese that aren't good for us. And peanut butter and jelly would be a much better alternative. I thought that was pretty funny. But also, that's a vegan sandwich. So don't forget about peanut butter. There's also almond butter, which is absolutely delicious, cashew butter. So any of those are alternatives to using regular butter. I also spread avocado on bread because I just think it tastes really good. Hummus, another easy food. I always make vegetables and have leftovers so I can eat them, snack on them, eat them at lunchtime. Beans and greens are one of the meals I make, and we're going to be talking about other kinds of things that you can consume. The almond goji berry bars are a guilty pleasure. So go ahead, let's go to the next slide. So I apologize for that overlap. I don't know why that happened, but on the slide. Anyway, these are just example of vegan-based meals. And if you'll notice, you really have to shift to looking at ethnic cuisine in order to be able to eat a vegan-based diet, because our typical American meat and potatoes diet just does not transfer very easily to eating vegan. But and a lot of these things have recipes that are really easy to make. And when you go into a restaurant, a lot of restaurants, Indian restaurants, will have the vegan or vegetarian options. And the last place I went, they had them separate, because the vegetarian had a cheese that's based on milk that they use, but they had other things like dal. Some of their stuff uses butter, and it depends on the restaurant. But all of these black beans, tofu, learn to love tofu, veggie chili. I talked about greens and beans, a Moroccan tagine. There's a Moroccan place near me, and you can get vegan tagines, made with beans. I make those at home, absolutely delicious. Soba noodles, those are a buckwheat noodle. Again, and then, there's a lot of chefs that are exploring this vegan cuisine these days. So you can find recipes for Nigerian tofu, which is not necessarily originally a Nigerian dish, but something, a quinoa salad or a lentil salad is something that you can make and take for lunch every day. Baking tofu, you can add some flavor to it, give it some better texture. And if you like eating a sandwich, because that's convenient, you can throw it into a sandwich. So just ideas. Go ahead. Where do you get inspiration? Farmers markets, community supported agriculture. When you get all those vegetables, you have a reason to cook them and eat them. So um, you know, belonging to a farm and having to get vegetables every week is a great way to change your diet. Misfits is a national market for getting vegetables and fruits at your home. I actually used to get those on a regular basis during COVID because I wasn't going to grocery stores, and it was a way I could get access to things. And they also sell, canned beans. They sell other items that you can use for recipes. And I'm going to have specific examples of some websites, web newsletters. There's a lot of vegan organizations around that have like vegan fests, and it's a great place to go to taste particular vegan items. Um, uh, you know, if you're gathering with friends, say, hey, we're doing a vegan potluck. Would you bring a vegan dish? It's a great way. And I'll mention it again later, but New York Times Cooking is a really, really great resource that I use all the time. Go ahead. So chefs to look for, these are folks that I've either made, that mostly I've made recipes from. I'm familiar with their books or their recipes. Some of these people write for the New York Times. Some of them are on their own websites. Hopefully many of you are familiar with Molly Katzen. She originally wrote the Moosewood Cookbook, which was like one of the first ever vegetarian cookbooks that sort of went, in this day and age, we would call it went viral. People were really interested in that cookbook, and it really took off in a big way. And she ended up with a career writing cookbooks from it. The Heart of the Plate is one of the more recent of her books, which I like. She's updated her style and changed things. So, and my recommendation on cookbooks is get stuff from a library. Look at a book, see if it's something you would make, because it may be that author's recipes are too complicated or something you wouldn't want. Deborah Madison has been writing vegetarian cookbooks for years. Yewande Komolafe is very in these days. She writes for the New York Times, but also she's all over the place. Mark Bittman's been writing for the New York Times, and he changed his diet because he was running into health problems and said, oh, I need to figure out how to eat in a more healthy way. So that was encouraging to see. Yotam Ottolenghi, he is in London, but he's from Jerusalem originally. The book I mentioned here is called Simple because some of his other recipes are not so simple. So of all his books, I would recommend that one. Melissa Clark also writes for the New York Times. She has a new book that I have called Dinner in One, meaning dinner made in one pot or on one sheet pan in the oven. So things that are quicker and easier to make. And even though that's not a vegan cookbook, she has vegan substitutes for a lot of her recipes in there. So I really like her for that reason. Madder Jaffrey's been around for years. Indian cooking. The last book I just read a review of, I actually haven't gotten it yet. I have one of the other books from this woman, Abra Behrens, but the book is called Grist, A Practical Guide to Cooking Grains and Beans. And she has recommendations for making like a big pot of beans over the weekend, and then different ways to flavor those beans, like for every day of the week, the bean of the week, the bean flavor of the day. At the top of the slide, I talk about making friends with beans and whole grains. And I think that's something that's really essential to vegan eating. I am a huge fan of the Instant Pot. I have one, I use it multiple times a week. I use it for cooking whole grains. I use it for cooking beans. I love the fact that I can put something on and time it and walk away from it and not worry about the fact that I'm burning my house down because the beans take a while. Well, they take a lot less time to cook. Um, but I've also found, like, to get beans to a nice, soft, wonderful texture that I like. A couple of other things about beans I wanted to mention. Um, One is there are some beans that cook really quickly. Red lentils, to make like an Indian dal, or I'm going to be giving you a recipe for red lentil chili. Um, you don't have to pre-soak them. You just cook them in a recipe, and they're little flat um, orange discs. And grocery stores didn't used to carry them, but they do carry them now. Um, the other thing about beans is that beans do age. And if you have dried beans sitting in your cabinet and they've been there for 2 or 3 years, I would recommend compost and get a new batch, because as they age, they just don't cook up as well. So it's more difficult to do that. The other thing is beans and whole grains, they freeze really well. So you could cook up a pound of beans and then use half of the beans for a recipe and then throw the rest in the freezer. It's also true for grains. And I'm going to mention the closer the grain is to its original state, the healthier it is to eat. And I'm going to give you that example with oats. Now, oats are whole grain. It's not like rice where you get brown rice, which is the whole grain, and white rice, which has had the hull removed, and you get fewer nutrients. But oats start as a really like a berry. It's a seed, just like wheat or other grains. You can buy something called oat groats and cook them. They almost have a barley-like texture to them. I really like oat groats, and I have to eat a gluten-free diet, so I can get gluten-free oat groats and use them. And they're not just a breakfast item. You can use them. You can use them in dinner. You can make curried oat groats. There's all sorts of things. So anyway, so that's the healthiest. And then we move to steel cut oats. Some people call them Irish oats. They are like a cracked grain. And then you go down to the oats we know for oatmeal. And then you go down to quick oats, which cook up just in a couple of minutes because they've been more finely ground, and then instant oats, which are even more finely ground. So in terms of blood sugar impact, the closer you are to the whole grain, the less the impact that the carbs in that grain have on your blood sugar. Because they are processed slowly in your body as opposed to really quickly. So that's, and then I said from a nutrient standpoint, you're getting everything when you consume whole grain. So I think that I love the fact, I'm dying to get this book by Abra Behrens. I'm going to get it out of the library, on a practical guide to eating grains and beans, because she specifically talks about making those your friends on an everyday basis. So next slide. This, I think, is also essential to vegan eating, learning how to use interesting spices, herbs, flavors. I'm going to mention some here. We generally know regular paprika, but smoked paprika has a lovely, lovely flavor to it. And actually, the recipe that I'm going to give you for the chili has smoked paprika in it. It's just got this roasted kind of flavor in it that just really changes things. A curry mix, or make your own mix of, I keep all of the individual spices around to make curries, but every once in a while I'm lazy and I use a mixture of spices that are a curry mix. Cumin seeds, I think, are magic in the kitchen. They are used in Mexican cooking, and they're used in Indian cooking, Asian Indian cooking. You can toast them on top of the stove and they get this little bit of a roasted flavor. And I can't tell you how many times I have made dishes and people have said to me, what is it that makes this special? And all it is are cumin seeds. And you can put them whole in a recipe or you can grind them. The toasting is what makes them magic. Pumpkin spice mixes. Why am I mentioning this? Because we forget that these sweeter spices really work with bean and grain dishes and even vegetables. So I'll saute up some onion and garlic for a stir fry, and then I will throw some pumpkin spice mix in there. And then I'll use it for green beans or broccoli or anything along those lines. So you don't have to use a pumpkin spice mix. You can use cinnamon, ginger, cloves, any of those, what we think of as dessert kind of spices for regular cooking. Aleppo pepper is great because it has a lot of flavor, but not a lot of heat. So if you're not interested in making dishes that have a lot of spice, a lot of heat spice, but you like to add flavor, Aleppo pepper is great. I keep it on my kitchen table even. Za'atar, I think, is just really fun. And za'atar is made from sumac, thyme, sesame seeds, and sometimes it has salt in it. I just did a tofu dish with za'atar as the main flavor, and I cooked for a friend of mine, and he was like, what is this? Za'atar is a little, particularly the sumac is like it's got a little tartness to it. So it's just a really, really interesting flavor. And what I say at the end here is find reliable places to buy these items. And if you have any kind of a food co-op around you where you can buy some of these things in small amounts, you can try them and decide if you like them. It's a great way. And most of those places have really good turnover. So you're getting something fresh. You have no idea at the grocery store how long something has been sitting on the shelf. And you can also save mountains of money if you fill your own jars with spices, if you can do that. If not, Penzeys is a national company that sells spices and herbs. I think their stuff is very high quality. It's always fresh. They have some really interesting mixes of flavors that you can use in your cooking. So, and there's a few other national, online places where you can purchase. Penzeys also has stores, but some of these you might have to buy online. They frequently have free shipping offers, those kinds of things. So, but this really changes vegan cooking to make it into something that you're really interested in. These are magazine resources. Plant-based magazine, Vegetarian Times, used to be paper. It is now only digital. Bon Appetit is a regular cooking magazine, but I get ideas from there all the time. And they do have one issue a year about healthy cooking that has a lot more. But they do a lot of ethnic food in there now. So they have a lot of interesting recipes. CSPI is the Center for Science in the Public Interest. It's an organization that's been around for, oh, I don't know, at least 30 plus years, um, uh, doing a monthly newsletter on health, and it's nutrition based, but it's really the health topics are even beyond just nutrition. And then it's got a recipe every month. It also reviews foods. Um, there's somebody who is recommending vegnews.com. And somebody just asked, I think, if we will have access to the slideshow. The answer is yes. Jennifer is going to post it. She'll tell you at the end where she's going to put it so you can access it. And next slide. So some other resources, I mentioned the New York Times already. Pinterest has recipes, Sweet Potato Soul, The Korean Vegan, Oh She Glows Vegan blog, 101 Cookbooks blogs, Forks Over Knives. I don't go to these all the time, but I do go to them sometimes. And I found recipes from these that are things that I'm interested in cooking. Sometimes it really helps to read a blog because you feel like you're in a support community, that other people are interested in the same thing. And that can be extremely helpful. I have one thing that I didn't mention before that I meant to, and that is that there are now some good bean-based pastas. I started exploring them more from the standpoint that they were gluten-free. And I had some that were based upon garbanzo beans, which I thought were okay, but there's a new one that I bought recently. And the ingredients is, there's one ingredient on the label, yellow peas. Obviously they have to use some water. The brand is Zen Bee. And I literally just had that for the first time this week. And I think it's a really nice flavor, and you can make a pasta dish and not have to worry about, the fact that you're going to add cheese or sausage or something as a meat to go with it. And you get protein and fewer carbs from eating that pasta. So, and I think we're getting to the end here. Questions. So I know there are a few in the chat, and then there's a few in the Q&A. So.
Yeah, could you just repeat the name of the new bean pasta real quick?
Oh yeah, Zen Bee, ZENB.
Zen Bee. Okay. I think one of the questions in the Q&A, you might have got it covered, because I learned so much about the whole grain. So I think you kind of covered that. But I'll give Pamela a second to type in the chat if she wants us to go further in. But while we give that a second, do you want to give us your thoughts on seitan?
Yeah, I can't say that I'm super familiar with seitan. I think it's partly because I can't eat it.
Makes sense as a good.
It's got wheat in it, so I'm not going to try to. Although I could do a little more research on that if you're interested. I should also mention that there are a number of tofu items that are packaged and flavored. I'm always careful about the sodium content because some of them are really high, but others are not. And those are really easy. You don't have to play with the tofu itself because the flavors are there already. And I know my grocery store has some, my food co-op has, an even bigger selection, but those are an easy throw into a recipe or a sandwich kind of thing to do for tofu. So go ahead.
Thank you, Anne. And Pamela did add for us. I don't know if everyone can see the Q&A, so I'll just read it. That seitan has high protein content, but does certainly have a lot of gluten as it's made from flour. So, but Pam says it's very delicious. And then someone did ask earlier on, I know you have shared that you yourself maintain a gluten-free diet, but the person in the Q&A said they mentioned that they feel really exhausted in the morning after they eat gluten. So wondering if there is any correlation to those feelings. Obviously, you don't know their full scenario, but just if you want to speak to gluten-free in general.
Yeah, well, and I mean, the issue is it gluten or just the carbs? You know, that you're getting a lot of carbs from eating whatever it is you're eating in the morning, and trying to switch to something, number one, that like is like a super whole grain. Like I eat steel cut oats a lot for breakfast. I also eat regular oatmeal. Um, and making that with like soy milk that has protein in it means you're getting, you're getting whole grain. That I mentioned that issue with blood sugar because the exhaustion generally comes because the carbs increase your blood sugar and then they drop. Whereas when it's a not a whole grain carb. And if it is a whole grain, then the blood sugar appropriately, goes up, but doesn't spike the way it does with other carbs. So, so I try shifting that breakfast to something a little different.
That is all of the questions we have in the Q&A. Are there any other questions anyone wants to bring up?
People were putting some things in the chat,
Yeah,
so
there's a lot of resources.
we can include those resources in an email follow-up that we send to you about the program. And I was just going to look because I um, thought that there was.
I did look up the Misfits market and did confirm that it is organic produce on their website to answer that question.
Yeah. Yes.
And then there's another question if you're aware of any meal delivery services that are plant-based or offer plant-based options.
Um, Actually, this is just in the Albany area. There is. There's two, and I'm trying to. My sister subscribes to one of them. I can't remember the name right now. The place is Purple Carrot. Yeah, Purple Carrot is a good suggestion. And that's national. Actually, Mark Bittman was part of their team for a while. I don't think he's with them anymore. Some of the meal delivery services will allow you to make that choice. So if you're getting, there's one that's a really big name that's not coming to me right now, but I know that when you sign up with them, you can say that you want vegetarian or vegan meals. So if you want, a mostly, those are the meals that are all put together for you, and all you have to do is, throw them together to finish up the meal. So the answer is yes. There definitely are. HelloFresh, that's the one I was thinking of. Yep. They have a sister company, somebody said. So yes, so they do offer those options.
We have a question here that I think is a lot of people wonder with regard to fruit. How do you navigate high fructose content, high sugar content, as well as incorporating fruits into the regimen?
Well, the issue is whole fruits are really the best way to go. I mean, I don't recommend ever drinking juice, fruit juice. It just doesn't provide that much in the way of nutrients, and it provides a lot of sugar and a lot of calories. And we know black and white in terms of weight issues that drinking calories And I'm not even talking about alcohol. I'm just talking about any beverage um, is will cause weight gain because we our bodies don't perceive the consumption of the beverage the same way it does the consumption of a food. So if you're, and they, again, this has been researched many, many, many times over, but if you're offered food and you stop eating at a certain point because you feel full, but if you add a calorie laden beverage to that, generally that doesn't change what people eat. So it's really important to eat whole fruits, not fruit juices. Um, Harder in winter, especially in the Northeast. Um, but the issue is to think about how much you're consuming. Do you need to eat an entire apple, or is a half an apple okay? If you're worried about sugar, I mean, I eat small amounts of fruit. I eat some at breakfast, I eat some at lunch, I eat some at dinner. I do really like fruit. Again, not huge volumes of it. And eating it with a meal when there's other things that you're consuming um, also helps in terms of, not no blood sugar spikes or thing. You don't really have to worry about the spikes as much. Um, but, really the sugar we really have to worry about is the extra sugar we consume because we consume way too much of that in our day-to-day lives. I don't worry as much about people eating fruit because they don't tend to really over consume it. Anything else we have? Thought there was
Um,
no.
I don't see any more questions. I'll scroll through the chat once more. Will be providing the PowerPoint, and Anne has some recipes for us, which I'm excited to try, especially now that I know that I can incorporate pumpkin spice into my meals, which I have a small container I've been trying to get rid of. So I'll be adding those to the learning dashboard, and those will be available. We'll also have this recording available on the Attorney Wellbeing Program's website under our physical wellness pillar, and have those resources there as well.
Yeah. There's a question about tips to start slowly. Um, and, I would recommend just trying to make one plant-based recipe and, have it for dinner, maybe have leftovers for lunch. Um, I am retired, busy doing other things, but I would, when I was working full time and in the office every day, I would make um, some bean-based dish, on Sunday, and at least have that to eat for a few days for dinner, and also have some leftovers for lunch to eat. So I'd say start someplace that feels comfortable for you, and just do that. Just do one recipe a week. Um, and I said I'll be providing you with some recipes. If you quickly want to throw something in the chat right now about something you want to particularly know how to make, I know one recipe I'm giving you is kind of for a tofu scramble with some interesting spices. I eat it for dinner, but you can eat it for breakfast too. A red lentil chili, which again is really easy to make. You just, after you saute some garlic and onion, you throw all the ingredients together, and you let it cook, and it doesn't take very long to cook. But if there's other kinds of recipes that you're interested in, let me know. I have a nutrition background, but I also am a food person, so I like to cook. So I'm exploring recipes, all the time.
Right. Well, thank you so much, and I'll I'll talk slowly as we welcome any more questions that come in. But like I said, we'll make those resources and recipes available. We've got a thank you and Q&A here. Um, but yeah, thank you so much, Anne. And I know you have services available such as your online yoga classes. So if you want to, um, I can put your email in the chat as well, if you want, so that if people want to reach out about anything, um, they have the ability to reach out.
Yeah, thanks everybody. I'm just excited that people came and they listened, and we learned, uh, and that's what this whole wellness movement for lawyers is about. That we can really team up with other people and feel like everyone is looking in this direction.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. The whole point in the attorney wellbeing program is to just be opening up these conversations and finding what works for people to help them feel better and feel like they're living well. And so, thank you so much, Anne, because you certainly have dedicated so much of your time and energy to that concept. So we are so grateful to have you, and I hope everyone else has a great rest of your day. And I will hopefully see you all soon.
Okay. Thanks very much, everybody. And I
Thank
appreciate
you,
all
Anne.
the questions and the engagement.